Chapter 14, Encounter at the Hospital. Crystal enjoyed the sentence very much. Looking at how nervous June was toward her, she felt very pleased. June was so excited that she was trembling. She looked at Crystal as if she were looking at her savior and her own daughter. When she saw that the latter looked better, she helped her up and asked carefully, "Crystal, do you have a way to help Wallace secure the Sullivan Group's project?" Nobody expected Crystal to ignore what June said and instead look at the latter's son expectantly. Immediately after, she nodded with a smile. "Wallace, why didn't you tell me about such a big thing? I want to give this bidding a try too. Why don't we work together? Our chances will definitely be higher. I'll go ask my brother and father to recommend us. When the time comes, everything will go smoothly." Actually, she knew very well that her father would never help her. Although her brother would help, with her father around, her brother was nobody at home. She only said that to save face for June and Wallace. "I appreciate your kind intentions, but my family has set a rule that I have to secure the project independently. I will think of a way to secure the project myself." June instantly stood up when she heard this. "Are you crazy? Crystal came to help you out of goodwill, so how can you be such an ingrate? Is it worth it just for the bet between Sharon and Nicole?" Wallace didn't say anything else. He glanced at the time, said he was going to the company to prepare the materials, and left in a hurry. June seemed to have noticed Crystal's grievance. After her son left, she quickly consoled her future daughter-in-law and grabbed her hand affectionately. "Crystal, you may not know, but the reason why Wallace couldn't accept your help is due to that jinx at home." After hearing what June said, Crystal's face revealed a happy expression. Sharon is an idiot that she actually made such a bet. At that moment, Crystal's heart was filled with anticipation. Wallace definitely won't be able to secure the Sullivan Group's project. The next afternoon, Wallace was called back by his mother. "Are you stupid? Why didn't you stay by Crystal's side at such a critical juncture?" "The bidding materials." Wallace opened his mouth but was stopped by June. "Don't you know what's the most important thing right now? If you solidify your relationship with Crystal, we need not worry about not having a chance to work with the Sullivan Group in the future." "Mom, this is my business. I had the intention of working with the Sullivan Group in the first place, so this is a good opportunity," Wallace said firmly. He and his teammates had been working hard all morning, so he was very confident in the bidding. He really couldn't understand why his mother wanted him to use the power of Crystal's family to negotiate the collaboration. While they were talking, Crystal slid out of the wheelchair. June quickly poked her son secretly. "Crystal, look. I heard you were going for a checkup," and Wallace rushed over immediately. "Let's go to the doctor's office and take a good look at your body." June passed the wheelchair to Wallace. Along the way, June and Crystal talked non-stop. Only when Wallace was mentioned would he reply to them. Before he reached the door, a familiar voice came from the office. "Doctor. Please help me think of a solution. Or you can tell me about the donor. I'll go and find out why he suddenly has no intention of donating." Sharon's eyes were red as she asked the doctor what had happened. "He just informed me that he had found a matching bone marrow, and the other party had agreed to donate it." "Why did the other party back out within a week?" "How can I tell you this? The hospital has to keep it a secret." The doctor seemed to be used to this kind of thing, so he didn't plan to waste any more time with Sharon. "Just a name or a simple contact, please." When the door was pushed open, Sharon stared at the doctor pleadingly. Astonishingly, the moment he saw Wallace and Crystal, the impatient doctor instantly regained his smile and quickly stood up to welcome them. "Isn't this Wallace and Crystal? How are you feeling today? Do you still feel dizzy? Why are you here? Hurry up and get out. Don't delay Crystal's treatment." June was furious the moment she saw her daughter-in-law. She didn't want to hear what the latter had to say. It's okay, Auntie. Sharon is also a girl, so it's convenient for her to accompany me. Auntie and Wallace pushed me all the way here, so you can go outside and rest for a while. Chapter 15, Pushed down. June thought that Crystal didn't want her son to know about her condition, so she left with Wallace after giving her daughter-in-law instructions. I heard you made a bet with Nicole. If Wallace doesn't win the Sullivan Group's project, you two will get a divorce, and you will kowtow to Nicole in public. The doctor helped Crystal with her physical examination as she looked at Sharon, who was standing at the side in a daze, and continued, Wallace stayed with me in the ward last night. He's not feeling well today, so I want him to rest for a while. Sure, Sharon calmly replied as if she didn't take it to heart. After all, she saw her husband leave Crystal's ward and the hospital with her own eyes last night. Crystal only said these words to provoke her. If it weren't for your stupid bet, I would have found a way to make Wallace win. Hearing this, Sharon couldn't help but ask with interest, Crystal, I'm a little curious. What can you do to help Wallace? The Sullivan Group's position is known by everyone, so they won't be easily manipulated by others. Since you have a way to make the Sullivan Group collaborate with the Heiress Group, I'm looking forward to it. Crystal turned her eyes slightly and sneered disdainfully. What do you know? The 4 casinos owned by my family were all built by the Sullivan Group. You can say that we have a deep connection. This time, the Sullivan Group forked out $2 billion easily. If our family wants to, we can get at least half of it. When the time comes, I can get my father to transfer half of it to Wallace. This will help him achieve his goal of collaborating with them. Sharon nodded. I didn't expect the Sullivan Group to have such a deep relationship with the York Group. Crystal stared at Sharon and said proudly, this is an innate advantage. In New York, who doesn't know the relationship between the York Group and the Sullivan Group? After she finished having her blood drawn, she looked at Sharon and said, Sharon, let me tell you this, a person like you will never know what kind of life I'm living. If you still want your face, take the initiative to leave Wallace. A woman like you doesn't deserve to stand beside him. Then, how did you know that Wallace needed your help? Sharon then realized that this lady had another motive for wanting to be with her alone. That was my original plan, but now, I think the priority is for you both to get a divorce than for him to get the project. Sharon was too lazy to talk nonsense with her. I'll wait and see then. I'll see what capabilities you have to convince your father to help. After all, didn't the gambling king not even give you a permit to operate the casino? Once she said that, Crystal's face instantly turned pale. Everyone knew that this was the pain in her heart. She had 2 elder brothers, 1 younger brother, and 2 younger sisters. Her father had 5 wives, and 2 were still alive. She didn't know whether the casino management permit would end up in her hands, but her pride wouldn't allow someone like Sharon to mock her. Accompanied by a tragic scream, Crystal directly fell from the wheelchair. Sharon hurriedly reached out to help her up, but she didn't expect to be seen by June and Wallace, who had just entered the room. In June's eyes, what occurred was Sharon pushing Crystal down. Without asking in detail, June grabbed her daughter-in-law and raised her hand. UB*TCH. Wallace rushed up and protected Sharon in his arms. June raised her hand and hit him on the back. What happened just now? Wallace looked at his spouse and asked in a low voice. Crystal, on the other hand, was dumbfounded. She didn't expect Wallace to ignore her lying on the ground and turn to look at that B*TCH, Sharon. June was infuriated by her son's actions. Crystal helped you so much, yet you still want to side with that B*TCH? Did she drug you to make you do such a thing? When the doctor heard the sound, he hurriedly ran out from behind the curtain and helped Crystal up along with June. Wallace turned around. Mom, she's my wife, your daughter-in-law. She's not a B*TCH. June clenched her fists, her face flushed red. She glared at Sharon with hatred in her eyes and said angrily, "Fine. Since you have such thoughts, I'm looking forward to seeing if you can win the Sullivan Group's project with your own abilities. If you don't win the bid, you will settle the divorce procedures on the same day." After saying that, June looked at Crystal with eyes full of love and tenderness. Her tone became much gentler as she said, "Crystal, let Auntie see if you are hurt anywhere. That vicious woman actually dared to push you." Chapter 16, Refusing to Cooperate. "It's okay, Auntie. I was careless." Sharon really admired this woman. How did she manage to cry so easily? If she has this ability, why doesn't she film a movie instead of trying to break up other people's families? I spouted nonsense and provoked Sharon. It's reasonable for her to punish me. Crystal gave the doctor a look. The doctor immediately understood and agreed. Crystal is weak to begin with, not to mention that she didn't say anything. She only said that she wanted to help Wallace get the opportunity to work with the Sullivan Group. I hoped Sharon wouldn't misunderstand, but I didn't expect Crystal to be pushed off the wheelchair while I was doing the test. Although I'm an outsider, I still have to say this. She's really vicious. I didn't. Although Sharon wasn't a tough person, she would stand up to defend herself if she was wronged for no reason. June still wanted to scold her daughter-in-law but was stopped by Crystal. "No need, Auntie. Since there's someone here who doesn't like me, I'll go back to my room first." After speaking, Crystal turned around and left. June wanted to say something, but Crystal had already left. She was so angry that her whole body was trembling. She stomped her feet angrily and pointed at Sharon's face. "Who are you? You're really infuriating me. It's all your fault that Wallace is in this state now. A useless person like you shouldn't be alive. Why don't you die with that old guy? Crystal is so gentle and kind. She wants to help us, but she's still bullied by you. Tell me, can you make up for it now that you've driven her away? Mom, are you so sure that she can help Wallace get the project from the Sullivan Group? She doesn't have the ability." Sharon explained seriously. "Don't call me Mom, I feel disgusted." June pointed at her son's wife angrily. "You're a jinx. Crystal can get half of the Sullivan Group's project money, and who do you think you are? What do you know? What kind of person is her father? He's the gambling king, and her mother married him with a rich dowry. She's nothing like your cheap mother, who shoved you into our family and died." Hearing June insult her mother like this, Sharon couldn't hold it in anymore. "Since you're so confident, then look forward to her really helping you." Thereafter, Sharon glanced at her husband and ignored the angry June. Along the way, she couldn't help but sneer. "Since they like to use their backgrounds to suppress others so much, I won't stand on ceremony." She took out her cell phone and found Tommy's chat. "From now on, we will try our best to reject the York Group's collaboration. We will also stop all the cable and electricity projects that we have with them. I will make up the losses with my personal account to maintain the company's profits." Even if they had collaborated with the York Group in the past, from the moment she took over, these collaborations no longer needed to be carried out. After walking out of the hospital, June was still scolding Sharon indignantly. "How could you marry such a useless woman? I found a useless man to marry into the family, and my son married someone even more useless. What a sin." The next morning, a shocking piece of news was released: the Sullivan Group had actually brought forward the bidding date. Wallace was glad that he was prepared, so he came to the Sullivan Group with a plan. Looking at the 828-meter-tall building that had a total of 162 floors, Wallace actually felt a little nervous. Such a company was the ideal place for him, not like the Heiress Group, which was a foul place. He wondered if they could see his sincerity. If he really succeeded, he could leave the Heiress Group and start his own company in the future. Plus, he didn't want a divorce yet, so he had to give it a try. On the top floor, Sharon and Tommy were discussing the decisions to be made during the shareholders' meeting. Sharon seemed to have thought of something. "Speaking of which, have we worked with the York Group for a long time?" Tommy thought for a while before explaining, "It's true that they used to work with us very well in the past. Later on, their company tried to break away from us several times, but nobody in the industry could afford the upkeep of their 4 casinos. In addition, with our company's political background, it wasn't easy for the York Group to withdraw from the casino business." Sharon nodded. "It seems like I don't know the Sullivan Group well enough. I have to speed up my reading of the information these few days. However, the York Group has finally understood that the Sullivan Group's position in the country is unrivaled. Hence, they want to use this bidding to strengthen their collaboration with us. Recently, they have also provided us with materials, but according to your wishes yesterday, we have already rejected them." Chapter 17, Who is CEO Charlotte? After a while, the office's notification bell rang. Tommy pressed the notification button, and Secretary Lydia's voice could be heard. "Mr. Tommy, he has arrived." Hearing Lydia reporting to the president, Wallace was a little nervous. He really wasn't sure if the Sullivan Group's president, Tommy, would give him the chance to meet him. As soon as the conversation ended, Tommy walked out of his office. "Mr. Wallace, I've heard a lot about you. I heard that you're quite capable among the younger generation. Come on in." Wallace didn't expect Tommy to be so young. The latter looked almost the same age as him. Also, he had previously heard that if he wanted to meet Tommy, he had to queue up. The people outside also confirmed the rumors, so Wallace didn't expect the latter to ask his secretary to invite him in directly. Tommy sat on the chair and sized up the man in front of him, his gaze carrying a strong sense of scrutiny. Wallace's originally gentle face was stared at until he was at a loss. Surprisingly, Tommy's gaze became bolder. He sized up Wallace from head to toe before gesturing for the latter to sit down. "According to my investigation, Wallace has a close relationship with the CEO. Therefore, it's no wonder that the CEO went through so much trouble to pave the way for him." At this thought, Tommy narrowed his eyes dangerously and smirked. Wallace was confused. Tommy is handsome, and there have been no scandals or news of his marriage for many years. Wallace frowned awkwardly at this thought. Does he like men? Wallace clenched his fists and looked back. Tommy then said, "Hello, Mr. Wallace. I'm Tommy, president of the Sullivan Group." "Hello, Mr. Tommy. I'm here to talk to you about the bidding of Sullivan's new project. Although the Heiress Group has just entered the construction industry, I'm in charge of all the projects. The few companies we've worked with have good reputations and results." Wallace handed the documents over and continued, "These are some documents related to our organization that I've compiled." Tommy yawned. He didn't even pick them up. Instead, he said, "I've already found out about the Heiress Group Construction Company. If it's possible, just sign the contract." "Are you serious?" Wallace was shocked. He couldn't believe that such a good thing would happen to him. The other party didn't even look at the information before agreeing. "Is it so easy to negotiate business now?" Tommy nodded. "Of course. Although your construction company is very small and wasn't within my considerations at first, our CEO trusts Mr. Wallace very much, and she really wants to collaborate with you." "Your new CEO?" Wallace was in disbelief. "I wonder who your CEO is." "Our CEO is Miss Charlotte from New York." "Charlotte?" Wallace touched his chin and frowned. "Other than my wife's mother, I don't know anyone with the last name Charlotte. But she passed away many years ago, and there doesn't seem to be any other family with the last name Charlotte in New York." Tommy didn't reply. According to Sharon, that was all he could say. Other than his mother-in-law, Lynn, Wallace didn't know anyone else with the last name Charlotte. Little did he know that his wife, whose two parents had passed away and had a poor family background, was the Miss Charlotte that they were referring to. At this moment, Tommy picked up the proposal. "Mr. Wallace, I saw from your proposal that your bid is $1 billion, which is half of what we proposed." Wallace nodded. "Yes, I think this price is reasonable. Do you think it's too much?" "No, but Mr. Wallace, haven't you thought of bidding for the entire project?" Tommy gazed at the other party, not expecting him to be so cautious. Wallace was even more shocked. "Mr. Tommy, you mean that you won't consider other partners for this bidding?" Tommy smiled and replied, "This was also instructed by our CEO. If you think it's possible, you can take over the entire project at $2 billion. We also believe in Mr. Wallace's standards." Looking at the other man, Tommy took out the contract and handed it over. "If you don't have any other problems, we can sign the contract." Did good luck suddenly come for me? Wallace was a little dumbfounded. He would have never thought that the Sullivan Group, which his company has been seeking collaboration with, had already prepared a contract for him and would be entrusting him with the entire project. "Our CEO also said that this money is for you to test your mistakes. Whether it works or not will determine our future collaboration." Chapter 18, Collaboration Success. After hearing Tommy's words, Wallace took a deep breath. Grandmother's goal was only to have a chance to collaborate. "However, not only have I won the bid now, but I've even gotten the entire project." Sharon's determined face suddenly flashed across Wallace's mind. Why was she so confident that day? Could it be that she already knew about the result? Who exactly is she? At this moment, Wallace suddenly had a strange thought. Could this legendary CEO Charlotte be my wife's alias? But when I turn around and think about it, how could there be anything that is so strange? I know Sharon's identity the best. Rather than letting my thoughts run wild, I might as well accept the fact that Crystal is helping me behind my back. Wallace couldn't help but ask, "Mr. Tommy, I would like to ask, is the CEO on good terms with the York Group?" When Tommy heard this, he almost laughed out loud. "Mr. Wallace, did you not read the latest news? If the CEO really had a good relationship with the York Group, I'm afraid we don't need to discuss collaboration with you anymore, right?" Wallace was stunned for a moment before realizing that the other party meant that this had nothing to do with the York Group. Who is the one supporting me? After leaving the Sullivan Group's building, Wallace was still in shock and excitement. He felt like he was dreaming as he held the successful bidding agreement in his hands. Seeing Wallace leave, Sharon quickly arranged for a car to return to the Heiress family. She couldn't wait to see what expression Nicole would have. In the hall of the Heiress family residence, everyone had a strange look on their faces. Why did Wallace choose this time to ask us to return home? Also, everyone knows that Wallace went to Sullivan this morning. If it was a business deal, it shouldn't have been settled so quickly. Everyone in the Heiress family was waiting to see him make a fool of himself. This was especially so for Louis, who wanted to see how humiliated the eldest grandson of the Heiress family would be. When Wallace walked into the room, he felt everyone's mocking gazes. Louis opened his mouth and said sarcastically, "I didn't expect Big Brother to be back so soon. Your trip didn't even take an hour. I'm guessing you didn't even go through Sullivan's door. It looks like Big Brother can't wait to get a divorce with that woman, so he didn't put in any effort to negotiate, right?" Nicole couldn't help but mock. Madame Heiress's expression was ugly. This kid hasn't said anything for so long, so they must have guessed correctly. After all, the requirements and difficulty of this bidding were very high, and the bidding date was brought forward. If Wallace wasn't prepared, it's normal for him to be rejected. But as he was the eldest grandson of the Heiress family, she didn't want Wallace to give up so easily. Hence, Madame Heiress looked at the latter and sighed. "Are you not prepared this time? If you tell me now that you failed, I'm afraid you have disappointed me. Also, Your actions today have really embarrassed us. If this gets out, the Heiress family's reputation will be ruined. At this moment, Sharon, who had just entered, stood beside her husband. When she heard Madame Heiress's words, she couldn't help but frown and give her spouse an encouraging look. These people are too much, they simply can't bear to see others succeed. They didn't even ask about the outcome and just mocked him first. Are they really a family? As for Nicole, Sharon couldn't figure out where the former got her courage from. When she has to kneel down and kowtow later, I hope that Madame Heiress will deal with this matter fairly. Wallace was very excited at first, but now, these people's actions made him speechless. He looked at everyone and took a deep breath. I didn't use the Heiress family's name to negotiate the collaboration, instead, I used the name of the company I established. The Sullivan Group's Tommy has signed a project contract with me, and the project will officially start next month. What? You got Sullivan's cooperation? Nonsense. How is that possible? You probably couldn't even get a meeting with the Sullivan Group. Really? Wallace, are you joking with me? Discussions broke out among the people present. Nobody believed that Wallace had gotten their collaboration in such a short time. No way. Absolutely not. Lewis immediately stood up when he realized what was going on. And you said you didn't use the Heiress family's name? Mr. Tommy is a famous figure in New York. How would he agree to meet you so easily? Besides, your construction company has just been established, and the biggest project you have is worth less than $1 million. Why would he take a fancy to you? Faced with Lewis's doubts, Wallace took out the contract expressionlessly and placed it on the glass table in front of Madame Heiress. This is the contract we have signed. Please take a look. Chapter 19, A Share of the Loot. This contract was undoubtedly a slap to everyone's face. Even Zachary, who had been watching the commotion, was shocked. Lewis snatched the contract from Madame Heiress and threw it on the floor. I don't believe you. You must have forged this. How could you have managed to clinch such a big deal in less than an hour? Zachary sneered. It's such a big project. We should be clear about it. They invested $2 billion, so don't try to fool us with a few $100,000. That's right. I can't think of a reason for how you managed to get this contract, brother. If you can get it done so easily, then so can I. Lewis was shocked that his cousin became the focus of the family so easily. Moreover, all the favorable conditions that his grandmother had offered had been taken away by him. If he really achieved this, the Heiress family would have no place for them in the future. Take a closer look at the seal on it. The contract is worth $2 billion. Are you satisfied? Bullsh *T. Lewis roared. You have the nerve to ask for a contract that is worth $2 billion. You think your small company can get such a big project? Dream on. Zachary looked at Madame Heiress and coughed a few times. Mom, this kid is treating all of us like monkeys. I don't think you need to look at this contract, he must have printed it and faked it. Don't talk nonsense. It might be Crystal who helped Wallace. I think this contract is real. June gritted her teeth and picked up the contract as if she believed that it had to be Crystal who helped her son clinch the collaboration so easily. Don't worry. Let me take a look at the contract first. Madame Heiress picked up the contract and examined it seriously for a while. Madam, Crystal is here. Just as Madame Heiress was scrutinizing the contract carefully, the butler walked in. When June heard that Crystal was here, she quickly stood up. Quick! Welcome her in quickly. Amidst everyone's anticipation, Crystal entered wearing a long white dress with an exquisite gift box in her hand. The moment she saw Wallace, she gave him her blessings. Wallace, congratulations on getting Sullivan's project. I knew you could do it. Hearing what Crystal said, everyone was stunned. How could this happen? Wallace really got this project? Madam Heiress didn't have the time to welcome Crystal. She flipped through the contract in her hands. The contract, the seal. Everything is well in order, it's true. Wallace, you really negotiated a project that is worth $2 billion successfully. Madam Heiress hurriedly went up to him, her cold attitude completely different from before. Wallace actually managed to clinch the project, and he managed to obtain all $2 billion of it. However, he did it in less than an hour. Nobody would believe it. Zachary also stared at his nephew in shock, feeling regret and helplessness. Before today, Wallace was still considered to be my junior. Whether it was his identity or status, the latter was definitely not my match. If I had known that this was going to happen, I would have taken this opportunity and not let this brat take advantage of it. However, he refused because he was worried about his own reputation. I didn't expect my grandson to achieve what I've always wanted to do. It looks like our company has a chance to grow. Madam Heiress's words were like a slap in everyone's face, and this meant that nobody in the Heiress family would be able to impede Wallace anymore. Great, this is really great. Wallace, how did you do this? Do you know that you've made a great contribution to our family? You're really great. Madam Heiress wasn't stingy with her praise. After she finished speaking, she quickly continued, I don't know how you did it, but the other party. Mr. Tommy didn't make things difficult for you at all. Mom, is there a need to talk about this? Of course, it's because of Crystal. The York family and Sullivan have such a good relationship, so it must be Crystal who helped Wallace. She's much more useful than some other people, said June as she pulled Crystal to her side and looked at Sharon with disdain. Wallace said in a direct manner, the new president seems to have wanted to collaborate with the Heiress group since a long time ago. Before I went, they had already done their due diligence on us, and Mr. Tommy is also very optimistic about our new initiatives. In other words, him clinching the project had nothing to do with Crystal, and this made her very embarrassed. The reason why she came at this time was that Sullivan had already sent a message regarding their decision to collaborate with Wallace's construction company. Her father told her to obtain a share of the project, /chapter 20, she is family, yeah, it seems like, because the project isn't related to a casino. So Sullivan doesn't really want to work with the York group on this. Crystal sat obediently beside June. Wallace had already made it very clear that if she continued to keep up a pretense, it would be even more awkward if she asked for a collaboration later on. Upon hearing Wallace's words, Zachary and Louis felt terrible. What were we thinking back then? Although the Heiress group can't compare to the Sullivan group, it is still considered one of the richest companies in New York. It isn't impossible for Sullivan to investigate us secretly. No wonder Wallace could get the contract so easily. It turned out that Sullivan already had a good impression of the Heiress group. Wouldn't that mean that anyone who went would have clinched the deal? We really did miss an excellent opportunity. I hope that Madam Heiress won't really give half of Heiress group to Wallace, or else our future will be tough. At this moment, Sharon walked up to Nicole. Nicole, do you still remember our bet? Nicole's expression suddenly changed, and she looked at the other party viciously. How could I forget about the bet? If Wallace didn't get Sullivan's collaboration on his own, then Sharon and Wallace would have to divorce. She would also have to kowtow to me 3 times in front of everyone. Otherwise, I would have to kowtow to Sharon. Now that Wallace has gotten the contract, doesn't that mean I lost? Impossible. Absolutely impossible. I'm the granddaughter of the Heiress family. How could I kowtow to a SL*T like Sharon? At the thought of this, Nicole raised her chin high and said arrogantly, Sharon, don't you know who you are? Our family provides you with food and clothes, and you weren't any help at all. You still want me to kowtow to you? Are you daydreaming? Sharon looked at her matter-of-fact expression. You're not going back on your word, are you? I didn't expect the Heiress family's upbringing to be like this. How interesting. If you say that, I'm worried that what you said yesterday will really come true. At this point, Madame Heiress seemed to recall something. When they were talking about the bet, that wretched girl seemed to have cursed me. If she really doesn't fulfill her promise. Nicole looked at Madame Heiress, and sure enough, her expression turned ugly. Wretched girl, quickly bow and apologize to Sharon. Didn't we agree to kowtow? What is happening now? Why has it changed to Nicole bowing after losing? Sharon stood there and looked at Madame Heiress seriously. I have never seen someone so biased. Nicole panicked. Grandma, how could you listen to her? She just wants to embarrass our family and me. Sharon, I've already asked Nicole to apologize to you. Don't be ungrateful. Madame Heiress originally thought that she would just gloss over this matter with a few words, but who knew that Sharon would actually put this matter on the line? She is really shameless. However, she still remembered Nicole's oath. If I don't fulfill the bet, will it really affect me? Sharon said matter-of-factly, if I was the one who lost today, won't I have to kneel down and kowtow to her? And even if you think that it doesn't matter whether the bet with me is valid or not, are you going to ignore Grandma's life and death? Nicole didn't expect Sharon to be so unforgiving today and even go at her so aggressively. She quickly said, Grandma, don't listen to this woman's nonsense. You'll definitely live to a ripe old age. Madame Heiress's expression didn't soften because of Nicole's explanation. Instead, she stared coldly at the latter. Grandma, Nicole could tell that Madame Heiress was really suspicious of her because of this matter. For a moment, she didn't know what to say. Then, do you think I wouldn't have collaborated with the Sullivan Group from the start? Wallace suddenly spoke, making Nicole even more speechless. Everyone now knew that Wallace was the biggest contributor to the Heiress Group's project. If she argued with Wallace, it would definitely be hard for her in the future. I'm your sister, Nicole gritted her teeth. How can you do this for an outsider like her? She's your sister-in-law, a member of the Heiress family. Just do as your older brother says. Don't talk so much nonsense. I didn't expect you to break your promise and curse me for the sake of your reputation. Madame Heiress slammed the table angrily, seemingly very displeased with her granddaughter's actions. However, anyone with a discerning eye could tell that Madame Heiress actually didn't take Sharon and Nicole's bet to heart. If it weren't for Wallace standing up for her, this matter probably would have been forgotten. Chapter 21, President Nicole stood there and looked at Zachary and Louis for help, but the two of them turned their heads away unnaturally. At this moment, everyone knew that they couldn't afford to lose the old lady's favor for the sake of Nicole, nor could they offend Wallace. Feeling everyone's cold gazes, Nicole stuttered and looked at Crystal. Since Crystal is so kind, she would definitely be willing to help me. As long as Crystal asks, Wallace will never speak to that woman again. Nicole could only place her last hope on Crystal, but she didn't expect the latter to just be quietly drinking tea and completely ignoring her situation. Nicole, have you thought it through? Do you want to kowtow and admit your wrongdoings, or do you want to make your curse come true on Grandma? Every word Sharon said sounded like a devil's voice in Nicole's ears. If I abide by the bet today, I will only lose a little dignity. But if I don't abide by the bet today, Grandma might not love me as much as before. If I have to weigh the pros and cons, I would rather lose my dignity. At the thought of this, she immediately kneeled down without any hesitation. When she met Sharon's face, Nicole felt like vomiting. Under everyone's gazes, Nicole's body trembled as she prostrated at Sharon's feet. Zachary secretly took out his phone and captured this scene. I was wrong. I shouldn't have spouted nonsense. Nicole's voice trembled. I will definitely return today's humiliation to Sharon 1,000-fold over. Apologize louder and more sincerely. I didn't hear what you just said. Nicole lowered her head, bent down, and lightly kowtowed. She held back her tears of humiliation and shouted, "I'm sorry. I was wrong." "Then, what did you do wrong?" Sharon looked at Nicole, who was in front of her. Even though the latter was apologizing, there was no regret in her eyes. Instead, there was anger and hatred. Nicole gritted her teeth. "I was wrong to doubt Big Brother's ability. I shouldn't have bet on him failing. It's no wonder that the Heiress family likes to verbally abuse me. To a certain extent, treating other people in this manner makes me feel good. However, I don't want to be like the Heiress family. I won't bully others like this." When Nicole reluctantly wanted to kowtow a second time, Sharon stopped her. "Since you know you're in the wrong, pay more attention to what you say next time." On the surface, this sentence was meant for Nicole to hear, but Sharon's voice was very loud, as if she were warning everyone who mocked her. Wallace was a little surprised, suddenly feeling that his wife was different from before. However, he couldn't specifically pinpoint what was different about her. Recently, her behavior has been abnormal. Previously, she encouraged me to engage in collaboration talks with Sullivan and kept saying that she believed in me. At that time, I felt that it was strange. It was as if Sharon had already known that I would succeed. Where did she get the confidence from? After being helped up by Sharon, Nicole's tears finally fell uncontrollably. But she didn't dare to say anything else, afraid that she would say something wrong and make Madame Heiress unhappy again. Crystal looked at the surrounding atmosphere. "It seems that it's time." She quickly walked to Nicole's side and brought her to a seat to rest. "Since Sharon doesn't mind anymore, let's end this matter here. Nicole knows she did wrong." Crystal looked at Madame Heiress. Madame Heiress nodded and felt a little better. She actually didn't want her granddaughter to apologize and kowtow to Sharon, but Wallace didn't look happy either, and this bet was also related to her life. "This time, I'm teaching you a lesson. In the future, for matters that you can't handle, don't provoke others. Even if you want to make a bet, don't implicate your family." Sharon educated Nicole, but the latter buried her head in Crystal's arms. "Grandma, Nicole knows she's in the wrong. She'll never do something like this again, just forgive her this once." At this moment, Crystal stood up and pretended to be a good person. She comforted Nicole and also won Madame Heiress's favor. Her words undoubtedly gave the old lady a way out. Today is the day Wallace got this contract. Let's hurry up and pack up. Let's celebrate our collaboration with Sullivan. Sharon, who was completely ignored, suddenly said, "Grandma, since Wallace has successfully negotiated the project, can we give him the position of Heiress Group CEO?" Hearing this, Madame Heiress raised her eyebrows, and her heart skipped a beat. "I did indeed say that before, but Wallace is a junior after all, and he is my eldest daughter's child. If possible, I still want to hand over the family business to Zachary." Thinking of this, she started to ponder again. Chapter 22, like her seeing the change in Madame Heiress's expression, June immediately understood her mother's thoughts. "Ever since I was young, hasn't Mother been biased enough? She has probably already thought about what she would do if Wallace wasn't under her control in the future, or if Zachary and the rest were chased out." Madame Heiress really wanted to take back her promise. After all, she was only using the position of CEO as bait. It was understandable if she wanted to take it back. However, she couldn't say this right after Wallace got the contract, so she pondered for a moment and said, "Do I need you to remind me? Tomorrow night, our family will hold a grand banquet. I will invite famous celebrities from New York to participate. When the time comes, I will publicly announce that we will be collaborating with the Sullivan Group and taking on the entire project. At that time, I will officially announce the identity of the new CEO." With that, Sharon nodded in satisfaction. Wallace felt a warm current rush into his brain. This moment is finally here. It will be easier for me to implement new policies in the Heiress Group in the future. Otherwise, In its current state, the Heiress Group will sooner or later be emptied by those veterans who are always engaged in politics. Other than that, Wallace, Grandma has something important to tell you. Madame Heiress suddenly thought of something and quickly walked up to her eldest grandson. I hope you can contact the Sullivan Group CEO and invite her to the banquet tomorrow. Thereafter, the old lady stared at Wallace expectantly, as if she were very confident in him. If that person is willing to attend our banquet, it will be a great thing for the Heiress Group. Perhaps our company's stock price will rise as well. However, Wallace frowned and replied with some doubt, I only saw Sullivan's Mr. Tommy today, and I didn't see the CEO at all. Also, we just came to an agreement today, so wouldn't it be inappropriate to use Sullivan's name for our own gain? It doesn't matter. The Heiress Group is now tied together with the Sullivan Group. From now on, the Heiress Group will be on the same level as them. We have a powerful backer now. Madame Heiress spoke proudly as if no other company could shake their position within New York. Even if their CEO doesn't want to come over, you can invite Tommy over. After all, he's Sullivan's second in command. We would still be very proud if he were there. Seeing her son in a difficult position, June quickly spoke up. Mom thinks Sullivan's CEO is very close to my son and that she could be at his beck and call. That is too much. That's right. If we can invite Tommy over, that's fine too. Madame Heiress was completely immersed in her joy. In the future, the Heiress family's future prospects will be bright. If the younger generation works hard, the Heiress Group might even be able to rise up to become a big conglomerate. This means that the Heiress Group is going to prosper under my control. If that's the case, I'll consider it. Wallace nodded, and there was some hesitation in his tone. What are you thinking about? You must do it. Madame Heiress patted her grandson's shoulder as if she wanted to give him some confidence. What if Tommy doesn't want to come? Wallace remembered the other party's attitude toward him at the company. He couldn't figure it out and wasn't sure if he would really come. After the family meeting, I will have to give him a call first. Sharon's gaze fell on Madame Heiress's face. She wanted to hold a banquet to show off the Heiress Group's power. She wanted to take this opportunity to announce that Wallace was the new CEO. She wanted to support her husband in this, but she didn't want to reveal her identity, so she still needed Tommy to be present. As for the CEO, I'm afraid there's only a chance if she wants to see us. Otherwise, we won't be able to get close to such a big shot. June laughed when she heard that. That's right, the CEO must be busy every day. I heard that Miss Charlotte is also a powerful person. She's not like some people who stay at home every day and can't even cook or wash their clothes properly. Sharon seemed to know that her mother-in-law was talking about her. Maybe she's like me, staying at home every day. The Heiress family glanced at her. They had never seen such a shameless woman before. Humph, how is that possible? Look at her status. How dare she compare someone like that to herself shamelessly? Chapter 23, Heiress Group's distribution. Everyone present criticized Sharon for not knowing the decorum and insulting Sullivan's CEO, but Sharon didn't defend herself. Since I'm the target of everyone's hate, I should leave as soon as possible. Otherwise, I would make everyone unhappy. After the meeting ended, Wallace called Tommy. Hello, President Tommy. Hello, Wallace. Are there any problems with the contract? I've read the contract, and there's no problem with it, but there's something I need your help with. Wallace only wanted to complete the task that his grandmother gave him. Seeing that Tommy didn't seem to have any objections, he continued, I want to ask if the CEO of your company is free tomorrow. Because we've reached an agreement with Sullivan, our family wants to hold a small banquet. Of course, it's just a family banquet. I hope you can attend it with the CEO. Tommy was silent for a while before he replied, I understand. I'll take a look at the CEO's schedule and give you an answer in 10 minutes. After saying that, He hung up directly. Wallace anxiously waited for Tommy to get back to him. On the way home, Sharon's phone rang. When she saw the caller ID, she guessed what had happened. "Don't worry, I'll be there. You'll have to make a trip there too." After getting Sharon's confirmation, Tommy gave the news to Wallace. Tommy's voice came from the phone, and Wallace turned on the speaker. "Wallace, she will be coming. She'll go over directly." "Really? That's great. Thank you, Mr. Tommy." Just as Wallace was about to say something, Madame Heiress came up excitedly. She didn't expect such a joyous event to happen so easily just as the Heiress group needed help the most. After hanging up the phone, Madame Heiress said to all the members of the Heiress family, "Go and prepare the best dishes and drinks. Invite the best bands in New York. In addition, inform all the big companies in New York and invite them to attend. Also, make sure that they know the Sullivan Group CEO will be present. The invitation letter must be made with real gold and crystals." With Madame Heiress's order, the Heiress family entered a busy period. The moment this piece of news was released, the entire New York was shocked. It seems like the situation in New York is about to change. Sullivan's new CEO will actually be appearing at the Heiress family's banquet. The Heiress family members' phones were exploding with calls. Madame Heiress's proud expression couldn't be concealed. It seems like the Heiress family will soon become the most prominent family in the country. The younger generation went to work. Madame Heiress returned to her office and sat down for less than 5 minutes before she called Zachary back. "Mom, are you really going to give the position of CEO to that kid?" Upon entering the room, Zachary couldn't help but speak up. Madame Heiress frowned and said coldly, "It's all because of you guys being disappointing. Plus, I promised Wallace that I would give it to him." Zachary shook his head, his tone filled with determination. "Mom, that won't do. You can't let him be the CEO. If he only got back a few $1 million share of the project, I would have a way. However, this kid got the $2 billion project directly. He's the major contributor to the company. If we don't give him a reward, I'm afraid the people in the company won't be convinced." Hearing Madame Heiress's words, Zachary made up his mind. His tone was filled with hatred. He got the contract so easily because Sullivan wanted to collaborate with the Heiress Group in the first place. In addition, Crystal is here today. It must be because the York Group is helping him. I heard that he spent an entire night with Crystal yesterday. Isn't the gambling king famous too? In my opinion, he must have borrowed the power of the York Group to get the contract. If that's really the case, after he gets the position, we would definitely have to collaborate with the York Group. At that time, if we want to become the richest in New York, Madame Heiress looked displeased. Is that so? Of course, it's true. Although the York Group didn't express their support on the surface, Big Sister has been secretly trying to matchmake Crystal and Wallace. I think we need to think this over. Hearing her son's argument, Madame Heiress fell into deep thought. She knew her daughter too well. She is so ambitious that nobody can underestimate her. If I'm not careful, the Heiress Group will fall into her hands, and things will become difficult. Chapter 24, Crystal stays over. Translator, Atlas Studios editor, Atlas Studios. However, Madame Heiress knew very well that those senior executives who supported Zachary didn't do any real work apart from forming cliques and organizing office politics. The parasites of such companies would be eliminated sooner or later. Moreover, the core members of the Heiress Group were all young people. Young people were more used to Wallace's style of doing things, they all admired and trusted him. If Zachary takes over the company at this time, it will definitely cause a huge commotion. Mom, you don't have to worry about certain things. Zachary was loved by Madame Heiress because he knew her too well. He knew what she was thinking and could read her actions well. Young people these days are asking for as high a salary as they can. If they are unsatisfied, they will leave. The Heiress Group is now a golden brand. Every year, many young people try their best to get in, and there are many who are willing to work here. Madame Heiress frowned. Her desire to make Wallace the CEO had diminished significantly. I know that Crystal likes Wallace, and those two are childhood sweethearts who have grown up together. During my birthday, Crystal even gave me a piece of land. If that's the case, it would explain why Wallace could get the $2 billion project. Plus, Wallace's architectural department is just for show. Young people these days only like the things he designed because they want something new. Look at people our age who would like to live in that kind of place. And what kind of a smart home is he working on? It's so cheap, and it is capital intensive. Those Internet of Things houses are nothing compared to what the Heiress Group is good at building. Hearing this, Madame Heiress was completely shaken, and she nodded. Back then, June found a matrilocal son-in-law just to get a share of the Heiress Group. If she wasn't pregnant with Wallace, she probably wouldn't have gotten the share that easily. If that's the case, I might have to think of a way to retain my position as CEO. This matter was entirely out of Madame Heiress's selfishness. She really didn't like June. Part of it was because June was the eldest daughter, so she wasn't qualified to inherit the Heiress Group. It was only when Mr. Heiress passed away that she became the leader of the company. Therefore, she didn't want June's status and power to continue growing in the Heiress Corporation. We have to restrain my eldest daughter's family in order to ensure the stability of the Heiress Group's assets. My second son and third son's families are harmonious, and they won't let the Heiress Group's assets benefit outsiders. At this thought, Madame Heiress made up her mind. She looked at Zachary and said calmly, "Zachary, you have to listen to me in the company in the future. Take your time to stabilize your collaboration with Sullivan. I'll think of a way to settle the rest. Mom, don't you know who's on your side? Big sister is married to an outsider, and third brother's mind isn't on the business. Don't worry. Louis and I will always be on your side." "Okay." Madame Heiress nodded in relief. "At tomorrow's banquet, I will appoint Wallace as the new CEO in front of everyone, and you will be the project director. You will also be fully responsible for the collaboration with Sullivan." Zachary was overjoyed when he heard this. He didn't expect such a good thing to happen. At first glance, it seemed like he was doing this for Wallace. But in fact, his position indirectly took over the position of CEO. All the projects had to go through him. However, Zachary didn't dare to be too complacent. With Madame Heiress's character, if she had any doubts about him, she might not put him in an important position in the future. "Mom, don't worry. Everything that I have today is all thanks to you, so everything of me is also yours." Zachary promised the old lady with confidence, but he was secretly thinking about how the entire Heiress Group's assets would fall into his hands once she died. At that time, nobody would be able to stop him from doing anything he wanted. Back at home, Sharon was helping out in the kitchen. "Tomorrow, our family's fate will change, and I will finally be able to welcome a change in my marriage life." Seeing the smile on Sharon's face, June couldn't help but say, "Your husband has already gone out for afternoon tea with another woman. All you know to do is tend to the stove at home. It's really my biggest mistake not letting you guys get a divorce this time. If Crystal becomes my daughter-in-law, there would be nothing for me to worry about. Look at you, poor and useless, a piece of trash. Get out. I feel annoyed just looking at you. You can stay wherever you want. Crystal is coming to stay over tonight, so you better not appear and be an eyesore." Chapter 25, He will have allergies. Seeing that Sharon didn't move, June picked up a cold water bottle and splashed it on her. Sharon looked at her mother-in-law in disbelief. Her wet clothes stuck to her body, but the coldness it brought on wasn't comparable to the coldness in the latter's eyes. "Mom, what's wrong?" Wallace couldn't help but ask. He stood at the kitchen door with Crystal, both of them looking very compatible with each other. Hurry up and get out of here. Don't make a fool of yourself here, our family cares about our reputation. June looked down at her daughter-in-law and smirked mockingly. She then turned around and smiled at Crystal. Crystal, I personally cooked today. I even cooked your favorite stewed tomato seafood with cream pancakes. Sharon quickly left under her husband's strange gaze. When she went upstairs, she heard the undisguised mocking from the Heiress family and Crystal almost fainted from laughter while in Wallace's arms. When their eyes met just now, they seemed to have seen the most pitiful woman in the world. Young madam, why are you covered in water? Go wash up. When Sharon went up the stairs, she met the home's housekeeper. It seemed like the housekeeper was giving her a kind reminder, but the words young madam were extremely jarring to her ears. Even if Wallace ignored her presence, he wouldn't humiliate her in front of other women. However, June wasn't like that. She had never treated Sharon as her daughter-in-law. Seeing Sharon standing there, the housekeeper threw a rag at her. Someone like you is only worthy of using this to wipe your face. Sharon couldn't be bothered with the other party and walked straight to her room. The housekeeper didn't expect Sharon to dare disregard her, so she threw a basin of water in the direction of Crystal and June. Right after, she shouted, "Young madam! What are you doing?" Crystal, who was originally smiling coquettishly, couldn't help but shout when she was suddenly drenched by the cold water. June was also drenched. Wallace, who was standing at the side, also looked up in disbelief, just in time to see the water flowing down from where Sharon was standing. "Look at your wife. What is she doing? If you don't discipline her properly, she might really take Crystal's life next time." Wallace walked up the stairs in disbelief. Sharon watched as he walked over in big steps, her palms sweaty from nervousness. Seeing that he was about to raise his hand to hit her, Sharon extended her face out without fear. "It's not me. If you want to hit me, hurry up and do it." At this moment, Wallace was stunned. Sharon's face was full of stubbornness and unwillingness, like a little beast that had just weaned and met its enemy. Although her hands were trembling, she didn't flinch. Wallace's slap didn't land. "Why are you still standing here? Go back." At this moment, June and Crystal walked up. "Okay, Wallace. Take Crystal to change into a clean set of clothes first. Also, what are you standing here for? Get lost now." June then left with Wallace and Crystal without looking back. Back in the small study, Sharon's eyes were filled with tears. "Although Mom and I were exiled, I never suffered such grievances. If my parents were still alive, the Heiress family wouldn't have bullied me like this. Nobody came to call her during dinner time. To the Heiress family, her presence was unnecessary. It would be better if she was gone." Laughter came from the living room. Sharon pretended not to hear it and just concentrated on cooking her dinner. If she didn't eat, she would be the one who would starve in the end. "Wallace, eat this first." Crystal picked up a piece of mango and fresh shrimp and put them on Wallace's plate. "I am allergic to mangoes." Wallace coughed lightly and avoided Crystal's hand. Crystal felt embarrassed and didn't know what to say. It was June who helped her out and patted Wallace's hand. "Look at you. This is Crystal's first time eating with us at home, so how can you talk like that? Besides, you ate too much that time, that's why you were allergic. Look, when you were young, you wouldn't even have a problem taking a small bite. The older you get, the more problems you have." Wallace didn't say anything, but he thought to himself, Sharon would know this. When she usually cooks, she tries her best to avoid some ingredients I'm allergic to. But when he thought of that woman, Wallace couldn't help but frown. "Come, Crystal. Eat this beef tongue." June was busy putting food into Crystal's bowl, brimming with enthusiasm. "Auntie, you're really getting younger. How exactly did you take care of yourself? Don't hide anything from me." Crystal's praise made June smile from ear to ear. "You're such a sweet child. I'll ask your mother out for a beauty treatment someday, you should come too.